Hello, everyone, and welcome to our 36th webinar and probably one of our most anticipated webinars of all these three and a half years that we've been doing this. And this is like what the background to this is that we our company has become a PCI QPA also, and in addition to being a PCI QSA. And this was back in the beginning of the year. And since then, we have worked on a few assignments and there was quite a few requests rather for dispelling so many thoughts on what is PCI PIN all about and what are the basics of cryptography, HSM. Many people don't even know the full form and how it is to be managed. Is there some best practices on cryptography, best practices on HSM management? So we thought let's combine it all together and make a webinar which covers those very areas. And so here we are. I really hope this makes sense, and thank you so much for being there. And what can happen is that whatever your queries are, please feel free to just type it in the chat box, and I'll be more than happy to take it up. And then if I can answer it now, great. Otherwise, then we can always I'll always be replying to you offline. That's also not a problem. And so stay with me. So for an exciting like 30-40 minutes of your time, I really hope everybody at your home is doing well in this COVID environment. So let's jump in. So this is what has been circulated to you with regards to the contents of the webinar. That is the webinar objectives. Introduction to PCI PIN, scope and applicability, then the basics of cryptography, best practices in key management, and then the PCI PIN certification process. Now, you might think, why have we clubbed in basics of cryptography and key management? Well, the point is that many people feel or think they know what it's all about, but the point is you cannot understand anything or rather much of PCI PIN unless you have a good background in cryptography and key management. So again, this is extremely interesting standard, very much underrated. And again, from the stables of the PCI Council, this is again another work of art. So this is we have our online YouTube channel where you published all our background, all our past YouTube videos. That's our channel. You can always do a search on YouTube for Vista InfoSec official, and you will find our name cropping up. And you can always subscribe to it. Then there's tons of channel content we publish very regularly, and okay, you'll be the first ones to hear it. We are shortly like looking at the hundreds of questions that we have received so far in our webinars, and many of them, many of the time they are repeated. What we are doing is that starting, actually I'm recording today, and we'll be having a 5-minute series, in the sense that most of these questions I'll be covering in 5 minutes, and they'll be extremely interesting. And we'll be hosting a new channel on that, not channel, a new playlist on our existing channel for that. So stay tuned and keep watching. I hope you have subscribed so you can keep getting upgrades and updates on whatever we are publishing on our channel. 5-minute videos. It's going to be very interesting. And before we start in, this is again what I really believe in. It's not the answer that enlightens, but the question. So keep your questions flowing. This is um, putting a face to my name, to the name. Most of you are from the names I see. Many of you are our clients. Thank you for being there. But some of you have not been so far, that is, and so that's me. And I have got my own company, Vista InfoSec. I'm myself a PCI QSA, QPA, CSSP, CRSC, many other things. And I have my own company, and we are doing many of these standards, many of these research articles getting published on PCI DSS, MASTRM, PCI PIN, PCI DSS, SOC 1, SOC 2, and stuff. So jumping right in, let us go ahead. A quick background about the company of ours. We were established in 2004. And we have our office started off in Bombay, India, and then over the years we incorporated in the USA in 2014. And then we got ranked by Deloitte as the fastest growing company in APAC, one of the fastest growing companies in APAC. That was in 3 years back, and we became a certified QSA. Last year we incorporated in Singapore, and it's doing very well. And then again we became a PCI QP, as I said, in the beginning of this year, Jan, and we set up our own office in New York. The earlier office in 2014 was and still is in Delaware, and soon we should be coming up in Los Angeles on the West Coast. And these are our services, service profiles. In case, to just give you a background, we have an entire service tree on compliance and governance. We do many of the things that is required in companies, whether it's PCI DSS, whether it's HIPAA, GDPR, SOC 1, SOC 2, NESA, CCPA, which is the Californian Consumer Privacy Act. We are having an entire team dedicated for just VAPTs, secure config assessments, web appsec mobile, and then there's a tech team which does all the designing advisory on IT. And the key point is that we don't sell any hardware. Most of the companies that are so-called out there, consulting companies, they would be selling you hardware, software, other additional, management services, SOC services and stuff. We don't do any of those things. We are purely your partners in compliance. And we have our own LMS, that is academia compliance online, for internal and external trainings that we provide. These are the certification services that we do, certification or attestation, whatever you might want to call it. So anyway, you can just breeze through it. These are a few of our clients, and I'm sure that you recognize most of the names. And towards the end of this webinar, there'll be a survey. We put in a lot of time and money to get this webinar in place. Please do complete the survey at the end and leave your remarks, your comments, your feedback, your suggestions for future webinars and all. So jumping right in, a brief on the standards as such. What is the PCI security standards all about? Um, of course, I won't get into PCI DSS and stuff, just to let you know how they all, patch in, how they all plug in. So there is PCI PED standard, which is for standalone PED devices. um, there's PCI PADSS for the application, and there is PCI DSS, which is for the environment, hosting the cardholder data, which could be storing, processing, and or transmitting. And okay, okay. Okay, I got a quick. Okay, there is William. William, thank you for the query on PADSS. He's asking on PADSS, what does what is it? Okay, how does PADSS patch into all of this? Okay, two things. First is that I'm not taking you through PADSS now. What I'm doing is that I'm covering what the entire suite of standards is and where PCI PIN, that is a subject for today, patches in. All right. Okay, a follow-up query. He's asking how is PADSS, what is PADSS all about and stuff. Okay, now you're in luck, because just the previous webinar that I had was on PADSS. So please feel free to visit our YouTube channel. That is there, PADSS and PCI SSF, which is the upgrade of PADSS, and how they patch in. They are there on our YouTube channel. Feel free to go there and look it up. And okay, coming back, there is PCI DSS, which is for the environment, PADSS for secure applications. Now it is getting upgraded to SSF. And there is PCI P2, which is like an end-to-end solution, point-to-point encryption. There is PCI PTS POI, which is point of interaction, which is for those security of the devices per se, is protection of sensitive data at the point of interaction, devices, secure components, cardholder pins, and account data. Now, PCI PTS PIN, what we are going to cover today, stay with me on this. This is very, very important. It is for the digits that you type in at those ATMs, at those POI kiosk and all those things, where you are typing in those 4-digit, whatever 4-digit, 5, 6, whatever digits you have of the PCI of your card PIN, um, while you are making a transaction. Now, of course, this doesn't apply to the CVV entry that you do, that is there for online channels. This is for what you enter on those devices. So this is what we are going to cover today. And then PCI PTS HSM, which is for the logical security and physical and device security of an HSM. And of course, the last thing is PCI CP, card protection, which looks at the physical and logical security for systems and business processes. So this is the, by and large, the overall view of the standards. This is how it looks like. This I got from my dear friend Mr. Bhatnagar, Nitin Bhatnagar, who's a very close friend of mine, very nice guy, gem of a guy. He's the associate director of PCI Council in India. So this slide belongs to the PCI Council. And so this is how it is. So how does various standards patches in. So there is PIN security, which is relevant more at the issuers. There is card production. What standards are relevant where? That's what I meant. So there is the PCI PIN, card production for physical, logical, and token service TSP. They are all relevant at the issuer or at the cardholder's bank. And all the other standards, which is PIN transaction security for PTS, POI, PADSS, HSM. These are all more from the merchant, more from the vendor, solution provider, acquirers, processors, and all those things. There is, of course, Secure Software Framework (SSF), which is the upgrade to PADSS, all applicable to the vendor and or solution provider and or service provider. And then last but not the least is PCI 3D Secure. This is more at the acquirer or at the issuer side. Could be both sides. So what is the objective of PCI PIN? This is something which is very important for you to understand where all it is applicable and what is the standard all about. So it is very important that you understand this point, which will really drive home the point of the relevance of what is PCI PIN all about. So identifies minimum security standards for PIN-based interchange transactions. Uh, you know, Interchange would be both ways. That is from the issuer uh, to the bank, or from the bank to the merchant, wherever not the merchant. So from the issuer to the bank, or issuer is getting injected into the POS devices, the encryption keys for the POS devices and the POI devices, because those keys are getting used for the PIN interchange. That is when you enter the PIN, it travels from the POI devices to the service provider and or the acquiring bank. So how are the pins getting encrypted? So encryption keys, key encryption keys, how are those being interchanged? All those things comes under PCI pin. Now, securing the pins, the encryption keys, and the keys that are encrypting the encryption keys, all those things come as an objective of PCI pin. Applicability, where all it is for secure management, processing, and transmission of pin data during online and offline payment card transactions processing at ATMs and attended and unattended POS terminals. All right. So it is for all those areas. So it is not meant for the protection of your CVVs. Please be clear on that. And okay, our next query for the day. Okay, this is Mary, and she's asked a very nice question, and that is a good catch. Not that I tossed the ball, but the question is very, very nice. That is, what about storage? Secure management, processing, and transmission of personal identification data. Storage is not very clearly spelled out. Any ideas? Anybody as to why storage is not of uh, PIN data, not really written anywhere in one of the applicability requirements for PCI PIN? You can just type your answer in the chat box. So, all right. Why do you think is storage not mentioned in the applicability requirements for PCI PIN? Anybody? Okay, I've got a few answers coming in. Don't worry, I'm not going to take your names, and in case you're wrong, you wouldn't get embarrassed or something. Anyway, it's not really a test that is happening. It's just like a healthy interaction. Okay, okay, okay. A few of you got it right, so it was pretty easy. Under normal circumstances, storage of PIN is not allowed. It's a strict no-no under PCI DSS. It comes under something called as sensitive authentication data, also called SAD. So that PIN storage is absolutely not allowed unless you are a issuer. So that's it. So we move ahead. Anyway, Mary, thank you for the question that helped clarify this point. So what the standard layout looks like. So stay with me on this. It's a bit complex, and don't worry, I'll take you through it. And there is transaction processing operations. So anyone who's into any sort of transaction operation, so not everything is applicable to everybody. That's what it basically means. So not everything is applicable to everybody. So if you're into any sort of transaction processing operations, the first 7 controls would be applicable. And if you're doing symmetric key distribution using asymmetric keys, then there would be the normative index A, in which again there are two subtypes, two annexures, if I might say that, sub annexures A1 and A2. There will be 6 control objectives which looks at the remote key distribution using asymmetric techniques and operations. And in case you are also into digital certificates, certification and registration authority operations for key distribution, because you can also do a key encryption and distribution using digital keys, digital certificates. So in that case, normative index A and A2 would be applicable. And if you are into key injection facilities, then in that case there would be normative index B that is applicable. So entities that operate injection facilities for the injection of keys, key encryption keys, encipherment keys, PIN encipherment keys, PE case as it is called, for the acquisition of PIN data. So in that case, normative index B would be applicable. And normative index C, okay, normative index C just mentions or clarifies on the minimum and equivalent key sizes and strengths for approved algorithms. Well, okay, there is a nice question. We are having an international audience today, so I hope I get the name right, my friend. It is Yarot Che, Yarot, Yaroth Che. Nice name, by the way, my friend. And the question is pretty nice. If my organization doesn't have remote key distribution, how to manage the distribution of the key for injection to terminal in the remote areas? Wow. Well, in that case, if there are no remote key distribution facilities because of see, there are multiple strategies that you can employ. We have heard of this thing because there are companies even in India who are into microfinance, banking, and stuff like that, and they need to have this, very handy devices for capturing of card information. It could be debit cards and for quick withdrawals and stuff, microfinance bankings and all. So there also the remote key distribution is really not possible because they might get into range sometimes. There are two ways in which it is possible. One is that I can just think of from the top of my head. Now the first one would be that as and when now, remote key, the key distribution that happens is not something that happens every day or every hour or stuff like that. It happens once in a while when you are rotating the keys out, from the POI devices to the center acquiring system. So it's not something that you need an ongoing connectivity to the central host. So as and when you can have whenever you come online and you have a like a public key distribution system by which you can distribute the public key, the private keys, and then which can be the encryption keys for the pins for the activation of the POI devices or for the working of the POI devices. It can be, some companies I've seen have dial-in systems, so they can dial in using their mobile phones or SIM cards, or as and when they reach habitable areas where there are not heavy, connectivity issues. Or last but not the least is again we have seen one company do that, is that on a periodic basis they just call the devices. They send in new, and they call in the new devices. So these are the strategies that we have seen as for the key distribution, for the distribution of keys, injection into the terminals in the remote work areas. Now again, if you are having something like a terminal which is not which is not like a handy terminal which can be couriered, it could be an ATM and stuff like that. So again, that will be tough luck actually. But again, if it is an ATM, then you can always print the keys, and there are multiple strategies. I cannot get into it at this time, my friend. Just write me a mail. My email address is at the end. You can even courier out the keys using this tamper proof envelopes, but all separate. There is a strategy which is detailed extremely brilliantly in what to say, in PCI PIN. You have to split the keys, and then you have to say send half knowledge by one key, half knowledge by other key, and the third envelope containing the actual encrypted key. And then they put the encrypted key in the system, then they put in the first half of the decryption keys and the second half of the decryption keys, which could be the PK or whatever it could be, and then it is injected and then it is typed into the terminal. But again, it has to be done by more than one person, and again under the supervision of somebody senior. That all is possible actually. So you can think about it in case connectivity is really not an option, like a remote petrol pump or a remote ATM system for you. So I hope that helped you out. So moving ahead, the requirements layout, as we see what we saw over here, it was a brief summary of the entire standard, how many sections are there and how many index annexures are there, how many control objectives and stuff in that. Now this is what each of the sections look like. So transaction processing operations. So in this there are, as you saw earlier, 7 control objectives. I can't really get into each one of them. They are extremely elaborate, and again, if you have any interest in cryptography or key management, even if you're not coming under PCI PIN, I strongly advise you to at least give it a look. The standard is a free download. I don't know how PCI manages that, because if I go for any ISO standard, I have to pay a lot of money for that. So for the standard here, it is like it's a work of art, and there is even a technical FAQ, which is like 24 pages technical FAQ for each of those requirements or each of those objectives. What are the queries and what are the issues people have faced? They have documented it. So there is the last technical FAQ was published, I think, in 2018. Now the latest one was published, I think, in March or April 2020. So they're doing extremely good work. So if you're interested, really interested in cryptography and key management and HSM and what Yarod said with regards to remote key distribution and other strategies, that is the way to go. And of course, you can always write me a line. And since you are my esteemed audience, I will reply to you at no extra cost. I won't send you a bill. Yeah. All right. So these are the control objectives. So as it means, this is just like an objective, and below that are the individual requirements. Below that are the individual controls. So you can see the first one. PIN used in transactions governed by these requirements are processed using equipments and methodologies that are ensure that they are kept secure. And then P, encryption and decryption. And this is something funny. All the other sections, including this, you'll see that the control objectives 3, 4, 5, 6, 7s are the same, just the control objective. Okay, but the control requirements inner would change. Okay, so as this is for transaction TPO, and if you look at normative annex A, within that there is A1 and A2. This is for remote key distribution using asymmetric techniques. So this is again what applies to you, Yarot. You should give it a look. Normative Index A, section A1, remote key distribution using asymmetric techniques. So there is control objective 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and okay, the control went on the top. So it is control objective 1. So cryptographic keys used for PIN encryption, decryption, and related key management are created using processes that ensure it's not possible to predict any key or determine. So again, this all depends on how the key generation happens. And if you're using a good HSM, most of your pain is taken away. Now, if you're not using any sort of a HSM, also called as an SCD, secure cryptographic devices, so in that case, it is going to be very, 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 painful. So as I said, the 4 country requirements, keys are conveyed or transferred in a secure manner. Key loading to HSM POI acceptance devices is handled in a secure manner. Keys are used in a manner that prevents or detects their unauthorized usage. And last, keys are administered in a secure manner. Are, as you can see from the previous also, it's the same. But as I said, control objectives might be the same, but the internal requirements are not vastly different. Okay, so it's not like it's vastly different. So if you're covering the TPO, the transaction processing operations 3, 4, 5, 6, you're by and large covering most of the requirements. And over here again we see there is certificate and authority and registration authority operations. Keys again here also 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. there's a direct overlap with what we see over here in the other standards, other what to say requirements also. Requirement A1 is for remote key distribution, and annexure A2, section A2 is only applicable to you if you are a certification and registration authority. If you are not, you need not comply to it. You can take that as an option. And this is a normative index B that is applicable only and only if you have a key injection facility. Okay, so as you can see, then the requirements are there, but 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 are the same, and you can see that over here again. Where is it? Huh. So you can see that here also there is a massive what is it, the control objectives are the same, but the requirements in inner are slightly different. And over here again, this is for key injection facilities only. In case you don't have a key injection facility, then this particular annexure is not really applicable. So this is the normative index C. And what happens, so this is I've taken like a direct copy paste from the standard in itself. So you can use whichever standard you want for the encryption decryption. So for here, the minimum key size and number of bits. So if you're using TDEA, it's 112, RSA 1024, elliptical curve 224, and look at DSA, and AES is only 128. So AES is something that is respected across the board, whether you are into PCI DSS or PADSS or PCI PIN. And here also you can see that if the bits of security required for the encryption over here is, if the standard says 80 bits of security required, then if you're using a TDEA RSA, you'll need 1084. So even if it's asking for 80, but if you're using TDEA RSA, you'll need 1024 bits for security for to achieve the same level of security. Elliptical curve 160 and DSA 1024. And look at it as you go down. If the bits of security requirement for security in a particular requirement, if it says it needs 256 bits, AES 256 required for encryption. So in that case, if you say no, I am using RSA or my product uses RSA, so then you have to ensure that your product of RSA is using at least 15360 bits for encryption. For the encryption, yeah. And the elliptical curve 512, and again DSA Diffie-Hellman keys is 512 or 15360. Okay, and again, my dear friend Yaroth has another question. Does the PCI PIN require the organization to use the valid? Oh, very good question, my friend. We faced this issue in the Middle East. You are bang on, actually. This is a problem. Okay, let me read the question first. I just skipped the question. Does the PCI PIN require the organization to use valid PCI PTS devices like EPP, HSM, POS, and whether, if I can add it more, it could be, you can say that, does those devices have to be, like PCI PTS certified and stuff like that, or PCI HSM certified? So this is a question that is best, we always say, ask your acquirer or ask the brand. If they are okay with it, everything's fine. In a classical case, what had happened was that um, mm, mm, mm. there was this particular client that we were working with, and they were having a P2PE solution in place. And what had happened is they changed the algorithm on the PUI devices. They changed the code on that algorithm on the PUI device, which in that case would have rendered all the PCI pin and everything as null and nullified. It is annulled, never existed. So in that case, how would they require to do PCI pin and PCI P2PE and entirely? So here again, we ask them to check with their acquirer and the brand, and guess what? Their acquirer and brand simply were okay with it. Now, I can't get into the details of who it was and what it was. Client confidentiality binds me. It is their choice because they are carrying the risk. I'm not saying what they did was right or wrong. They are finally burdening, they are finally shouldering the risk. And so they said, it's okay, we have checked and it is fine. It is not a major change. So better you need not do PCI PIN again or PCI P2B again. So it all depends on, you need to check with the acquirer and or brand as to whether what is their feedback and whether they want you to go through it again, and whether they want you to use a valid PCI PTS devices for EPP, HSM, POS. um, to be on the safe side, we always say that ensure that it is certified, because tomorrow if your acquirer changes, or tomorrow if the compliance requirement of your acquirer changes, you will be in deep shit trouble. So better be ready from now and ensure that you are compliant. So, and this is what the certification process looks like. So it's the same by and large, actually, that you can see for all your PCI processes. That is, first there is a strategy meeting wherein there is a general overview of the process, and here there'll be the review docs. The project plan would be shared. Like we have a DMS portal, document management system for evidence uploading. GRC portal we have. Or we then look at addressing any sort of specific client queries that might be in place. Then the scoping happens. Then there's a gap assessment, where we do a quick review of the PIN requirements at the client side and how much they are in sync with it. And then we give them a remediation plan, and they are required to fix it and then upload all the evidence into the portal, DMS portal that we have. And then there comes the final assessment, where the auditor comes and does the final assessment. There is an internal QA and the final ROC and AOC that is released. Now, okay, so that was how the PCI PIN works, an overall view of PCI PIN, and the basics of cryptography. We'll quickly go through it. Okay, the introduction that, okay, interconnection of the internet is basically a global connection of computer networks, and cryptography is one of the most critical aspects of secure communication. It comes from the word crypto, KRYPTO, which actually means hidden secrets. So it's a method for securing all your communication and data by encrypting readable data into a coded format, or by replacement, which cannot be read by anybody without having the right access to the decryption algorithms and the codes. Now, how it works, basically speaking, authentication, so it proves the identity of the person who's accessing that information. It provides privacy and confidentiality, so that unintended readers or people do not get access to the text. Integrity, why this is very important, integrity, because what happens is that it's not just who can get access to the code, to the data. In case somebody changes the data, there will be a hashing algorithm in place. So the hashing algorithm will ensure and flag the reader that the data is not what it was supposed to be when it was sent to you. Somebody changed it. And last but not the least is non-repudiation. So it could be that I send the mail, and then because I'm getting into trouble, I simply say, no, no, it was not me. It was maybe somebody else spoofing my email address or my credentials or my IP and stuff. So non-repudiation is also a concern that is taken care of by cryptography. We'll get into that now. And this is what the architecture look like. So there is Alice, there is a public key and there is a private key. So this is how a digital signature works. There is a public key and there is a private key. Both are stored in something called as a digital chain. The private key is there with Alice, depending on what is a function. So somebody so Alice can can encrypt the data, whatever is there, send it across to the other person. The other person can decrypt the data if required with the public key, giving the addressing the concern of non-repudiation. So digital signatures or public key and private key is not just used for encryption and decryption of confidential data, but it's also used for non-repudiation. What I mean by that, public key is something that I publish in the public, typically speaking. Anybody who wants to send me encrypts using the public key that is visible to everybody. When the data comes to me, I can decrypt it. The data cannot be decrypted using the public key. It can only be decrypted using the private key. So since I have the private key, I can decrypt the data and look at it. But in a digital signature, that goes in the other way. That goes literally in the other way. Now I am sending a message to the people, to you, for example. How would you know that it is from me? What I'll be doing is that I'll be encrypting the data with my private key. And when that message comes to you, you decrypt it using the my public key, which is available to everybody. And if you can read the message, you know for sure that this message was sent by me because only I have the private key. So depending on what you want to do, you are managing your public keys and your private keys. So if it is ensuring security of data, then you encrypt using the public key and then decrypt using the private key. If it is non-repudiation, you encrypt using the private key and decrypt using the public key. So it depends on which line or which direction the data is flowing. There is a secret key which is like age old pre-shared secret or single key encryption decryption. There is secret key cryptography or symmetric cryptography. So both the sender and the receiver needs to be aware of the keys. And the next part is the public key cryptography, what I said earlier. So one of the keys is allotted to each person called also called as a public key. It is published in open directory, accessible to everybody, something like a email address. So when you take a digital signature, say from Entrust or VeriSign or whatever, so many providers are there, Encode, so many providers. Anyway, so when you take that digital signature, your public key is stored in the certification authority of VeriSign or Entrust and visible to everybody. But the private key is something that only I have. So each entity has two keys, a private key which is secret and a public key which is well known. And this is what I was saying earlier. Private keys are used for decrypting, public keys are used for encrypting when you are sending confidential data. This is how it is. So BCD data has to be sent. Uh, all the people will encrypt using, there are three people BCD, they would all send the data using encrypting using the person's public key. The data is received by the recipient and he or she then decrypts it using the private key. So there are these two types of it, A, B, C. Let us look at it. Secret key, SKC, secret key cryptography uses a single key for both encryption and decryption. Public key cryptography uses two keys, one for encryption, the other for decryption. And third is something called as a hash function, one-way cryptography. Now, this is not used for encryption, decryption at all. Okay, this is used for confirming the integrity of the data that is being sent. So when I'm sending some information to you, some data to you, I will also append something called as a hash function. I run some algorithms on it like an MD5 or an SHA1 or an SHA2. These are the hash functions, hash function protocols or algorithms. I'll get some output from that. And when the data is received by somebody, they run the same algorithm on the data and they get the same hash function from it, the hash output from it, and they compare the two before and after. If you change even one bit of data, just one bit, like 0 and 1, the entire hash output will change, entire. So the recipient knows, no man, the hash is totally different from what the sender sent. So this data has been tampered with from the time it was, the hash function was generated. So when we look at this, the functions of where is it? Yes, of in a purpose of cryptography, and we have privacy and confidentiality. So here you would use something called as a secret key cryptography or a public key cryptography. Integrity, you would be using the hash function, and the non-repudiation, you'd be using some only and only the public key function, because there the data is encrypted using the private key and decrypted using the public key. So authentication, again, it proves because there is a host to host function, and only the one who have got the authentication codes can see the data. Okay, so moving ahead, the public key and the private key cryptography, it is called as asymmetric key. Now when you are reading the standard PCI PIN, you have to be aware that both are allowed. Symmetric and asymmetric keys are allowed. So asymmetric key is public key and private key, and secret, secret key cryptography, SKC, or shared key cryptography is also called as symmetric key cryptography. Now, the last point is something that has to be clear about. I'm very surprised nowadays that even if this particular process has been in existence for like more than 20 years, people are still not aware of it. Once you are encrypting with a public key, you cannot decrypt using the same key. You need the private key for that. A brilliant piece of mathematical algorithms. And hash function, it's a one-way function. By one way means you cannot, like, if I take some data or some file or some program and convert it into a hash function, you cannot reverse the hash function and get the key again and get the data again. At best, you can generate the hash function again of something else or the same data again and compare and check whether the hash function is the same. If the hash function is the same, the data is the same. If the hash function is different, the data is not the same, or it has been tampered with. And the last point is the entire field of public key cryptography rests on the existence of one-way functions. What do I mean by that? If I encrypt using the public key, I cannot reverse encrypt it using the public key and get back to. I cannot do anything on it to get the uh, original text again back unless I decrypt using something called as a private key. In the same way, if I encrypt using the private key, I cannot reverse engineer it and get the original data again. I have to again decrypt using the public key. Okay, so it is the existence. So it is both in some way also beautifully called as a hash function. And needless to say, there are many attacks on cryptography. One is the cipher text only attack. It's only data. The only data available is a target cipher text. So they just get a sample of the text, and then they try to brute force. The hackers try to brute force and check whether various combination of keys, whether the original text can be got back. And then again, there is pairs of other ciphertext and plain keys. So if you have more than one sample, it is much more easier. I wouldn't say very easy. It is relatively more easier for me to identify what algorithm might have been used and exploit uh, if there are any weaknesses in the algorithm or in the way it's being used in that system. Okay, Yarot, my friend, again another question: between symmetric and asymmetric key, which one is more secure? So let me throw this question to the team, to my beloved audience watching this program. What do you think is most secure? Public key, symmetric key, or asymmetric key? Symmetric key, asymmetric key would be the public private key combination. So what do you think? Just type in your answers quickly. Let me just see, and then take your best shot. It's okay if you're wrong. Nobody else can see your answers. Okay, so almost everybody gave the right answer to that. Is that the most secure is the asymmetric key, which is the public private key pair, because I need not be circulating the decryption keys. Problem happens in any sort of cryptography is when they are using. Also, if I might add another dimension, which another um, I have to appreciate Tony, who has given one more aspect to this, that is the strength of the keys and the algorithms used. So if I'm using an AES 256 or I'm using a 128 or 64-bit, or what algorithm I'm using and what is the key strength, that also makes a huge difference. So as far as key management is concerned, there would be, as far as key management is concerned, I'd be more skewed towards asymmetric key, because I need not be worried about that, I giving you the password and then somebody else knowing the password and then misusing it, because the you once you encrypt it using the public key, you can't decrypt it using the public key, and the public key is anyway known to everybody. You can only encrypt using the public key, and a decryption happens using the private key, or vice versa, depending on the use. But again, as I said, again, as I said, it is going to be a close call, because if you are using what to say, an ineffective algorithm, or if you're using a very low strength keys, then it is possible for it to get reverse engineered, and the keys getting brute forced. So again, Uttam, he's asked a nice question. How much is the threat of quantum computing in the near future? It is quite a bit, Uttam, if I might say this, because it is it can do within seconds what will take years. And quantum computing is not just in the realms of science fiction now. I'm expecting to see it in our lifetimes, workable quantum computing model in our lifetimes. I'm sure that that is definitely going to happen, and it is no longer just like research papers and very shady science labs where it is getting done, and hopefully it might happen and stuff like that. Quantum computing is happening, and it changes everything. The way the computing happens, I'm not even sure whether the same Windows will work on it or not. So quantum computing is not just a new processor which will do processing like 1,000 times more efficiently, or 1,000,000 times more efficiently than your current processors. Quantum processors would change everything, in the sense, I guess, even your BIOS will change, even your operating system, everything will change. And I don't expect it to be I don't expect in our lifetimes, that is in the next 30-40 years, whatever is there, to be seeing laptops um, based on quantum computing, like portable laptops having quantum functions inbuilt and working on quantum computing. I might be wrong, same way like Bill Gates was wrong in the early 90s, where he said that, okay, why would anybody need memory more than 1 megabyte? And I'm sure that at this time his phone is carrying memory a few thousand times more than what he had said would be required. So I could be wrong, and I hope I'm wrong, because I would love to see before my eyes close a quantum computing laptop. But if it happens, all these algorithms will go. It is like everything will get would be able to be get compromised in like the snap of fingers. So nothing would be safe after that. So, but I'm sure that given the intellect of our people, those hardworking people at MIT and so many research laboratories across the world, they would be coming up with more stronger algorithms, because at this time, one of the restrictions on having more advanced cryptography functions is that it will super overload your processors, in the sense that once you start using it, it will really slow down your processing speeds. But once I believe the quantum computing is in place, the what to say, the stopper or the brakes which was being applied to the enhancement of cryptography technologies would also be lifted. as would the brakes be lifted on the decryption or brute forcing technologies. So once that happens, then it will be what we see now. That is a cat and mouse game, each one trying to be one step ahead. And at this time, I believe anything is hackable, because I was very shocked when SSL was hacked. I don't know about you, but I was shocked, because SSL was literally synonymous with remote computing and tunneling and VPN. SSL, and SSL VPN boxes were being ported out with their BIOSes and hard-coded technologies based on SSL2, SSL3, and overnight it got junked. Overnight. Overnight. And the kids in my office are hacking SSL3 and posting videos. Now what would happen once quantum computing comes is anybody's guess. Anyway, so thank you for the wonderful question, Uttam, and the rest. Thank you so much for making my session so much invigorating and not dull and lackluster. So moving ahead, my friend. um, Attacks on cryptography, chosen plain text, targeted ciphertext, um, you know, um, guessing the identifying patterns, identifying the algorithms using plain text. Now, the basics of key management. This is again something I'll just breeze through. I'm just very much short on time. Um, what is key management? Why is a topic for discussion, and different key management techniques? Key management is how you're managing the keys. In short, this is a major issue, major issue with regards to PCI DSS, PADSS, any sort of security standard. Cryptography and key management is a major issue. And if you ask me, as a common line, where I find the weaknesses across all the hundreds of audits that I've conducted across my more than 25 years career, it would be cryptography and key management. It is very rare to see a company which has really done a good job in cryptography and key management. Key management is basically how you are managing your keys. So key management techniques support initialization of system users within a domain, generation, distribution, and installation of key material, controlling the use of key, updation, revocation, and destruction, storage, backup, recovery, and archival of key. Now, this thing is at the epicenter of PCI PIN key management techniques. You can't go anywhere without it. You can't say whatever. You are managing the keys. You are doing the storage mechanisms. You are doing the encryption mechanisms. You are doing the key injection mechanisms. So why is it a topic of discussion? Because more attacks are aimed at key management level rather than the cryptography algorithm in itself. So compromise the key management process and you have compromised the cryptography, because then you have access to the keys. Many a time, like so many times I've seen that they would be having like 14, 20 digit keys, encryption keys, 14 digit keys, 9 digit keys, 12 digit keys, but they have never changed the keys. It's always been the same. Now, it is practically in conformance. Objective of key management is maintaining key relationship and key material that counters relevant threats, and has to be a relevant policy in place for this. The threats compromise of the secret keys, compromise of the authenticity of the public keys, and unauthorized use of public or secret keys. Now, what I mean by that, authenticity of the public keys. So let's assume like you are sending your account details to me as a bank, and what if I have a backdoor sitting on the bank portal, where what is happening is that it is or I have compromised, or I've introduced a rootkit on the system, which is then publishing it out, not the authentic public key of the bank, but my public keys of the rootkit or the backdoor that I've installed on the system. So when you are sending the data to the system, this backdoor sitting on the system captures the data, decrypts it, makes a copy of it, and then encrypts it again using the actual public key of the bank, and then sends it to the bank. So if your certification authority is very loose, and I've seen that happen also in companies just to save some money, They set up their own, certification authorities because they want to save money. But the key management process is so weak that they are not in a process, that they are not in a position to confirm or deny to the recipients whether that key that is being circulated in their name, whether it is authentic or whether that has been compromised. Now, that is where a security policy, where a good risk assessment has been done, and what are the cryptographic requirements, where it can get compromised. Everything has been identified, and what needs to be done about it is documented. And the security policies was then specify practices and procedures from the technical and administrative perspective, which will be the technology and policy and procedure. Then responsibility and accountability of each party involved. So let's assume, like for example, we are doing even the audits for the NPCI. So in that case, when NPCI is sending the keys to a bank, they are sending it in an extremely secure manner. But what happens if once the key reaches the bank and the bank is treating it like, just like a common paper and just lying around? Then what happens? Whose responsibility it is? And then the switch gets compromised, then whose responsibility it is? It is not NPCI's responsibility. It is the bank's responsibility who received and then mistreated the keys. But there is also NPCI's responsibility from the perspective of ensuring that the bank who's receiving is educated enough to know how to handle the keys. Okay, now the type of records from the incident management perspective, and we have seen this thing, public key versus symmetric key techniques. A symmetric key again is very painful. Symmetric key would be having like a simplified key in the sense, no need to maintain a public key and a private key. But again, and also one of the plus points of symmetric key is that it is very less intensive on the hardware. So if you're using a public key transmission, a public key security for encrypting data in motion (DIM), so in that case there could be some overloads or additional workload on the endpoints for doing the encryption and decryption. But if it is like a pre-shared key using like a symmetric key encryption, so in that case the speed is maintained. So there are different ways in which it does this. So PCI PIN also educates on how you can have a symmetric key for key for encryption decryption between the remote devices and the banks, but that key is encrypting using a key which is actually a public key and private key function. So in that case, the same thing, Yarrow, like the key is distributed using the public key of the recipient, and then reaching the recipient, and anybody can see, it doesn't matter, because the private key is with the recipient. When the recipient receives it, they decrypt it using their own private key, and they have the key which can be used for encrypting the pin, and that key is then input into the system. So there is this good possibility of using asymmetric keys to encrypt as pin encrypt a key encrypting key. Asymmetric key is used as the key encrypting key, which is then used for encrypting the end data. And this is what I was saying, symmetric key generator, where the secret key is the same. And this is where the public key comes into place. In PCI PIN, both are used together. That is the key which is used for encrypting the key which is used for encrypting the pin, PK, pin encrypting key, could be symmetric, and the KEK which is used for encrypting the PK would be asymmetric. And wow, this is another ball game altogether. Techniques for distributing confidential keys, key layering, and symmetric key certificates. What I just told you with regards to enveloping keys within keys, master keys at the highest level. There is key encrypting key which are symmetric, or encrypting publication or encryption public keys, and then again the data keys for uh, actually encrypting the user data or the pin data. Key management lifecycle, a few key points that we have always seen as issues at our clients' places. Key management is simplest when all cryptographic keys are fixed for all time, but this is not advisable. crypto periods have to be in place for updation of the keys. And then the additional procedures for how to broadcast the keys at regular intervals for the authentication, so that no malicious user propagates keys in your name, like spoofing your name. And these are the life cycle stages: user registration, initialization, key generation, installation, registration, normal use, backup, update, archival, deregistration, recovery, and then finally revocation. The entire key management lifecycle, an extended key management lifecycle. So I've more than extended my timeline actually. So that brings me to the end, and thank you so much for being there. But please do complete the survey at the end and leave your comments. Do give some suggestions as to what all subjects can be covered next, and I'll be there with you. And these are the past webinars. There are so many subjects that we have covered. You would really appreciate, you really love going through it. When you go through our YouTube page, and this is the 36th, as you have seen. That's a YouTube page. We've got quite a few subscribers as on date. Pretty good on that. And that's our Facebook page. Again, we paste a lot of content on it. And our LinkedIn page is there. And that's our contact details. Do drop us a line, and you can put it down, and we'll be in touch. Of course, the email ID is sales, but do mark it in my name, Narendra Sahoo, attention Narendra Sahoo or something. And I will respond to you with the answers to your query. Rest assured on that. There are still quite a few queries which needs to be addressed. I will write back to each one of you. So thank you again. Have a wonderful day ahead and stay safe. Take care. Bye bye.